gentlemen. Now, the theme of this presentation isn't about what's going to happen in the next 10 or 15 years, but rather the next generation and beyond. Seamanship, or more particularly good seamanship, has always been universally accepted to be an essential skill or attribute required of seafarers. But what do we actually mean by seamanship? There have been various attempts to pin down a definition of seamanship, and I've chosen two that I think concisely capture the essence of the word. The exercising of knowledge necessary to navigate, maintain, and operate a vessel safely, and this slightly different interpretation, the art or skill of handling, working, and navigating a ship. From these definitions, we may derive that the practice of seamanship is not just a set of procedures or rules learned in a classroom, but it's also something less tangible. That the exercise of seamanship by both men and women is a skill or even an art which can only be achieved by experience and the possession of a particular aptitude for the seafaring profession. It must also be stressed that the attributes of good seamanship do not just apply to the deck department, as is often mistakenly believed, but applies equally to all other departments, including the engine room, the catering, and in the case of passenger ships, the hotel department. You may require to look harder to find references to seamanship in international regulations. The ISM code does not contain the term. It is, however, included in Article 94 of UNCLOS as reproduced here. Obtaining knowledge, understanding, and proficiency in seamanship is incorporated into STCW, but only in the context of the training of deck officers and crew. One of the most important references to seamanship is its inclusion in the collision regulations, specifically Rule 2 and 8, extracts of which are shown here. You'll note that Rule 2 does not use the word seamanship as such, but instead refers to the ordinary practice of seamen. What this rule appears to mean is that the exercise of seamanship by properly trained and experienced seafarer, acting with reasonable skill and care, is what is expected in situations where strict compliance with a rule to avoid collision may not be correct or even available in a given situation. And the solution can be enabled by the ordinary practice of seamen. Rule 8 is clear in that action to avoid collision shall have due regard to the observance of good seamanship. Ultimately, however, there is a fundamental understanding that the proper observance of the call regs will be by properly trained, experienced seafarers exercising good seamanship. Seamanship is essentially a set of practical skills a seafarer requires, not just in the everyday tasks of keeping a ship running safely and efficiently, but also in the ability to respond effectively in exceptional or unforeseen circumstances on board. For example, in the case of an emergency where cool heads are required. It is, in other words, a combination of technical knowledge, rule-based observance, experience, and critically, the ability to think creatively to solve problems. There is, however, a less tangible aspect to seamanship, in that it invokes a sense of professional and cultural identity in people who have embraced seafaring as a career, and who may belong to societies with a deep-rooted tradition in seafaring. This is what fundamentally differentiates seafaring from other professions, whereby it is practiced in conditions of confinement, sometimes in harsh and challenging environmental conditions, remote from family and friends, and many of the other things that most people hold dear. Working and living together under such conditions fosters an almost unique blend of professional camaraderie, teamwork, and resilience. I have referred to the cultural identity aspect of seafaring, which continues to be particularly strong in Greece, where the connection with the sea, seafaring, and international trading stretches back to the Bronze Age. A large proportion of the population in Greece possess a close bond with the sea and its traditions, with the rewards, challenges, and sacrifices this brings. It is a land of ship-owning dynasties who are proud of their ancestral connections to ships, seafaring, and free trade in an ever-changing world. Seamanship was always and continues to be an essential element in the safe operation of ships. However, we are on the cusp of a revolution in shipping with profound consequences for the way in which vessels will be manned and operated in the future. I am, of course, referring to the development of autonomous ships, and it is likely that this is a revolution which will have greater impact than even the transition from sailing ships to steamships in the 19th century. It can be said that the progressive development of ships, trade, and the skills and knowledge required of seafarers over the course of the 20th century has been incremental rather than revolutionary. Notable changes such as the advent of containerization, increased machinery, automation and control, and improved navigational aids have largely been painlessly adopted by the industry. Now, this is the ship I actually sailed on as a cadet. It was built in 1977, and also I sailed on the same ship as a junior officer. Now, in appearance, this vessel, almost 50 years ago, is almost indistinguishable from the large bulk carriers that are being delivered today. It had more crew who were not overburdened by paperwork and form filling. The ship has the same basic construction design, machinery, mooring equipment as found in today's equivalent. But appearances are, of course, deceptive. In those pre-GPS days, I can vividly recall taking astronomical sights of the sun and stars using a sextant when crossing the North Atlantic in winter. We could go for days without being able to fix our position. There is no doubt that the progressive introduction of more advanced technology in tandem with improving standards and ship management and regulatory oversight have brought great benefits. In other words, it could be said that these were all desirable changes from a human and societal perspective. But what of the future? Conventional ship types continue to be delivered with an expected lifespan of 20 to 25 years and will continue to require present or similar levels of manning and crew competence with training adapted to continuing industry needs. Nevertheless, the development of autonomous vessels, whether they be operated by personnel working from shore-based control centres or fully autonomous vessels, is increasing apace. By definition, the introduction of autonomous ships could drastically reduce or remove altogether the need for on-board manning, at least in the presently understood meaning of the word. How long it will take for the meaningful introduction of autonomous vessels is anyone's guess, although I would hope that this process would not negatively impact today's young or mid-career marine professionals. Looking ahead, there may be opportunities for seafarers to transition to shore-based roles, for example, in manning the operation of control centres or port operational crews, where seagoing experience will likely be considered an advantage. Otherwise, active seafaring may be pushed into the margins of specialised or local trades, recreational use, or on passenger vessels where visible command and crew may be demanded. There is no seamanship without seafarers, and with a decline in vessels requiring a full complement of crew, there is the risk that traditional seamanship skills will be eroded or even rendered obsolete. Of course, the rise of AI-driven autonomous systems concerns us all, not just seafarers, as I'm sure you'll all be acutely aware. What of the impact on a shipping company's shore-based staff? The effect on the crewing department is perhaps obvious. But what of the spare parts and stores department, the chartering department, and so on? The rest of the shipping support and supply infrastructure will not be immune from these changes. I have used the word desirable in the context of previous advances in operational technology. The question I would pose is this: Is what we see for the future of the shipping industry desirable or even correct from an individual human or societal point of view? Certainly any improvements in safety and a reduction in casualties would be desirable. However, we must also be wary of the vulnerability of autonomous systems, a cyber attack, or the failure of associated software and hardware, irrespective of built-in features of resilience. Incidents of interference with GPS signals is a reminder that we neglect traditional navigational skills at our peril. A serious failure of autonomous vessel systems could also have a catastrophic effect on global supply chains. There is, however, also an important ethical issue to consider, and that is, to what extent are we, as a society, willing to discard these essential human skills, whether that be seamanship or the wider operation of ships and trade, which have served us so well for millennia. I would therefore advocate that the gradual transition to autonomous shipping should be carefully managed in such a way as to preserve a core of active human involvement in the operation of ships, both on board and ashore, for the sake of our mutual future prosperity and security. Thank you very much.